Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Every Horror Movie on Netflix. I'm Patrick, and I'm here again with Chris
Hello.
and Steven.
Hi.
How are you guys holding up in quarantine hell world?
Just fine.
I'm doing great now that, well, we'll get into it.
I feel like you were about to say now that you finished watching 5 entire Final Destination movies.
Yes. Now that I don't have that to deal with, I'm doing great.
Yeah, we've been on a fucking quest over the last 2 weeks here. Have you guys done anything besides watch Final Destination movies?
I've done tons of shit.
What have you been up to?
Well, I'm back on my horror bullshit. I was saying the last couple episodes that it's too much for me with the amount of stress I'm under. Something kicked in me. I'm leaning back into it. I've been watching a ton of movies, reading a lot. A couple things I can recommend. Patrick, you might want to talk about this too. I watched the new-ish Shudder series, Cursed Films.
Yes.
Pretty interesting journey. Not a lot of stuff in there that I didn't know, but I appreciated the context it was framed in. What did you think of it?
Pretty interesting so far. Allison with a Y and I watched the Exorcist episode, and then we watched the Exorcist, the movie, right afterwards. And goddamn, I was impressed at how well that holds up. It's been probably 10 years at least since I've seen that, but still fucking rocks. And the Omen episode was also really interesting and kind of played right into my own skeptical views on the whole cursed film mythology. By the end, it just felt like a thesis statement on the whole cursed film concept that I totally agreed with. So I'm curious to see where the other 3 episodes go.
I feel like after the Omen episode, it's not really about curses anymore. It's just about horrible tragedies that have happened on film sets that unfortunately have been exploited by people trying to look too deeply into them.
Yeah, I like that it appears to be trying to build sort of a larger narrative arc and a larger statement or a larger examination of what a cursed film is or the truth or lack thereof behind that whole concept. And that's been drawing me in, as opposed to just like a series of 5 short documentaries going, oh, here's all this fucking weird shit that happened related to this famous horror movie.
Yeah, it's not True Hollywood Story. It doesn't have that kind of sleazy vibe to it. It's much more nuanced.
Yeah.
Bunch of other things, but I guess the last one I'll plug because it's something, it's not a movie, but you can get this online. Waxwork Records out of New Orleans has their own horror anthology comic series, and each of them comes with a 45 vinyl record. It has like the main House of Waxwork theme, and then there's a song for each of the comics. So it's been kind of fun to just like sit up late at night by candlelight and listen to this spooky music that's tailored to these sort of Tales from the Crypt-esque little comic anthology stories.
That sounds super fun.
What about you guys? Anything else?
Chris, I know you've been back on your horror bullshit over the last week or two as well. Any highlights?
Yeah, I really have been back on my horror bullshit. Been watching a lot of stuff. I won't get into all the nitty gritty because we have a lot to get to here. But of special interest to regular AMON listeners, I watched Pie Wacket, which is the follow-up to Backcountry from the same director and writer, Adam McDonald. And I was looking forward to that because as longtime listeners will know, I loved Backcountry. And Pie Wacket, I'm not sure if it's as good or it might be equally good in different ways. I don't know. It certainly held my attention, though. I would say cue it.
What's the concept? What's the elevator pitch for Pie Wacket?
It's on Hulu right now, so you can watch it on Hulu. It's about a girl who's got some issues with her mother, and she's into the occult, and she tries to solve her problems with her mother through an occult ritual, but we all know how that goes.
Nice. Well, I will throw in just one quick plug here. I have been fairly consumed with Final Destination movies over the last couple weeks and haven't really gotten into much of anything else. But last night, I was just kind of casually browsing the horror selection on HBO and happened upon this short film called Hairwolf. And it's just 13 minutes long. And when this episode comes out, it's only going to be on HBO for one more day. So if you hear this the day this episode comes out and have HBO, run out and check this shit out. It's a horror short that takes place in a black beauty shop, and the owners and patrons of the shop are beset by an invasion of zombie-like white people who want to participate in and kind of suck the life out of the black culture associated with the shop. It's just fucking delightful. It's visually really striking, has some great old school horror elements to it, and, you know, has great, you know, kind of political edge to it. So highly recommend that.
I was going to say, that sounds like a movie that has themes.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Does this sound too A24 for you, Chris?
No.
That might be a good segue, actually. So speaking of things that will not be on streaming for much longer after this episode airs, I think we might have cheated Death's design because all 4 of the Final Destination movies will be leaving in early
At the end of
May?
May, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So people have some time.
So if you want to watch along, hurry out to Netflix because you only got about a month more to watch them. That said, they were also on Netflix about 6 months ago, and then they disappeared and then came back. So I don't think it's going to be long until they return again.
Look, if you want to find them, you can find them, even if not on Netflix. They just kind of float from streaming service to streaming service.
Exactly.
I have a friend who's a Final Destination fan, and she just bought the whole series on Blu-ray, I think, for like $11 too. So
It's a fair price.
this isn't Criterion Collection we're dealing with.
So yeah, let's get into it. I mean, if you haven't gotten the hint yet, we are reviewing every Final Destination movie ever today. 4 of them are on Netflix right now. That's the first 4. And then the 5th one is available on Hulu. We figured we'd just knock them all out, even though they're not all on Netflix. This is kind of inspired by our Every Halloween Movie Ever episode that we did probably a year and a half ago now, I guess, which continues to be one of our most popular episodes. I mean, no surprise. So we're about to take you on this journey. We're cutting the usual spoiler room bullshit. If you haven't seen these movies and don't want to be spoiled, don't listen to this episode. Go watch whichever ones you need to, because we're going to get into everything.
Yes, and I think we're, you know, maybe I will be getting some hate mail on this one, and people will be saying, you're not a real horror fan because I love the Final Destination movies, because I'll just say right off the bat, I had a really hard time with this run of movies.
Interesting. Why?
So look, when you go into a franchise, you're not expecting a horror franchise, especially. You're not expecting every installment to be great. You know that there's going to be some bad movies in there. That's part of the deal. That's fine. But as opposed to like what we did with Halloween, these movies do not reward you for having watched the earlier installments. There's none of that like soap opera continuity that I appreciate in Halloween or Saw or any of these other franchises, or even Friday the 13th from what I know of it. Mm-hmm. It's just the same story over and over again, pretty much beat for beat, but they explain everything to you over again. They're incredibly formulaic. The characters are almost without exception completely disposable by design. I mean, the kill sequences, which is the main draw of the franchise, are usually entertaining, but you know, the connective tissue is so weak for most of this franchise that it's just kind of interminable.
So I will agree with that to a certain point. The weakest installments in this franchise for me are those that just seem as though they're following the formula, not making any effort to create characters that we care about, and not creating any connective tissue. But there's definitely connective tissue between 1 and 2. There's definitely connective tissue between 1 and 5. 3 and 4 are kind of weird-ass islands unto themselves, but I think there's more there than you're suggesting, at least.
It's not substantive, though.
No.
Like, like you get callbacks to things that happen in other movies, particularly death sequences, which are, I mean, understandably pretty fetishized even within the films themselves, but there's nothing like really thematically going on to link any of these together.
Well, no, but
I think that might be what Chris is saying.
Yeah, but also I think no one is coming to this franchise for substance or theme. You know, I mean, you're coming. Right, so this is the ultimate. I described it the other day when we were texting as like the ultimate theme park ride franchise. You know, you're just there for the fucking thrill.
Yes, and that's fine, and so let me backpedal a little bit, because I know that some of our listeners are going to be very upset at people talking bad about these movies, and I understand why that is, because if you went to high school and you went to the movie theater with your high school friends and you didn't want to like pay attention too closely to the movie and you wanted to see some gnarly and sensational and gory death sequences, and maybe you had a honey with you and maybe you were making out during the talky parts, you probably have great memories of this franchise, and that's great because this is the franchise is clearly designed for like a teenage audience to just go to the theater and just have a good time and then forget about it as soon as they walk in the parking lot. And that's fine.
Well, see, I had not seen these as a teenager. I actually just started watching them for the first time, but I overall enjoyed my experience with the franchise. But I mean, I think we should get into the nitty-gritty and start kind of breaking down movie by movie here, right?
And it may be because of how I watch these movies, where I kind of had to watch them for the show, and I was watching them in quick succession. That made it a lot more painful than if I watched them when they were all released. Because there's some significant. I mean, the first one came out in 2000, and then the last one came out in 2011. So we're talking about 5 movies over 11 years. So plenty of time for you to forget what happened in the last one, and maybe you do need that extra exposition in every movie that wore me so thin.
So would you view it, cue it, or screw it?
Well, we'll get to that, but yeah, let's dive into these chronologically here. So we begin with Final Destination from 2000,
the one that started it all,
which I described in my notes as the plain one. Actually, I just described these all by the inciting incident.
Oh, I did too.
Yeah,
I did too. Except the last one. The last one is like a little bit stranger and more like amorphous, but for the others it's like you got a plane, you got a roller coaster, you've got a highway.
I mean, for those who maybe haven't seen these movies and don't care to watch them, the basic setup is there's always a massive accident at the beginning of each movie where a bunch of people die in a horrifying way, and then our protagonist kind of flashes back. He has just experienced this whole accident as a premonition, and all of a sudden realizes that this horrible thing's about to happen. He warns a certain group of people, certain people listen to them, and then, 5 or 6 people get away from the accident, and then death pursues them and kills them in horrible ways while the people attempt to escape death's curse.
Horrible and improbable ways.
Yeah, so that's kind of the broad strokes. That's what each of these movies is. The first one, we've got a bunch of high school seniors who are going on a class trip to Paris, and one of them has a vision as they get on the plane that it's going to crash. A few of them manage to get off the plane for various reasons and realize over the course of the film they've cheated death, and death is going to come back for them one by one in the order in which they would have died on the plane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
I was actually really interested to watch Final Destination because of its X-Files lineage, because it was originally written as a spec script for the X-Files in the 90s, kind of in the heyday of the X-Files, and it was ultimately developed by Glenn Morgan and James Wong, who were prolific writers in the early seasons of the X-Files, and later went on to kind of co-showrun Millennium, which is a kind of a X-Files adjacent series starring Lance Henriksen that I'm a fan of. All shot in Vancouver. This movie actually had the same cinematographer as a lot of Millennium, so it looks very familiar, and it's definitely sort of an X-Files kind of concept. And that first half hour where they're on the plane and the premonition happens and they get off and the plane explodes, it feels like an X-Files cold open, kind of just stretched out to a half hour. And so I was like, oh, great, let's see where it goes from here.
And the amazing thing is that this actually began life. This whole franchise began life as this kid Jeffrey Reddick's spec script for an X-Files episode, and the original script for the X-Files episode version of this movie, I learned just before we started recording this, is actually online. We'll throw that in the show notes. I started reading it before we started recording here, and it was interesting. It's interesting to see Scully and Mulder folded into this whole story, and I'm curious to finish reading that. But it's perfect X-Files setup.
As an X-Files fan, I could see the X-Files episode playing out as I watched this movie. And, there's even Devon Sawa, who's kind of the main character here and kind of the last survivor. he even has a very Mulder-esque monologue where he's like, "What if this? And what if death did this? What if?" It's like sounds like something Mulder would say when he's spitballing, death's design theory or whatever.
Well, you want to know something crazy about that spec script? I have not read it, but I read an interview with the writer. Apparently, the original concept was pretty different. Like the script that he wrote for the X-Files. In that script, the characters who escape death are all driven to suicide because of the guilt for having done so.
Oh,
which, like,
that's a lot less fun.
It's way less fun. Can you imagine the entire movie is just a series of suicide sequences? That sounds miserable.
Yeah, that's definitely not fun.
Not fun at all.
Oh, I prefer it this way. And this movie, it's a very original concept, and it's a fun concept, and at its best, I think this Final Destination movie, the first one, it's a good little horror thriller.
It's everything you expect out of like a teen horror movie from 2000. You got the David Fincher-esque title sequence. You've got hot teens. You've got gloomy cinematography. You've got lots of blood and guts.
Dude,
yeah.
Zero morals.
Can I comment on that title sequence? Because this is a convention of like the first, I think, 3 at least movies. The title sequence is long as fuck. It's 3 minutes of just names on the screen and different shots of things in the main character, I forget his, Alex's room. And it's so dull.
Yeah, but Patrick, they're all clues. They're all clues. You gotta be paying attention.
I actually wrote in my notes 2 things. I miss New Line Cinema, and I miss opening title sequences.
Oh, I do too, 100%.
Oh,
give me that. People are still filing into the theater. It's a teen movie. Everyone's going to walk in 20 minutes late anyway. And so, you just have some like moody shots of like the desk fan, and it says Devon Sawa.
I mean, you make a good case, but I was bored to tears by these title sequences in the first couple of movies. I mean, of course, the movies make up for it because there's fucking some insane bullshit happening every 5 or 10 minutes, but it felt interminable to me.
They were long. I mean, I'll give it that. And I didn't particularly enjoy them as they were, but like Chris is saying, it does make me nostalgic for an era when there was a lot of thought put into the title sequence.
Yeah.
And you got Shirley Walker doing the music.
Oh, yeah.
You can close your eyes and pretend it's Batman.
Yep. I mean, we have not yet gotten to what I feel is the most important part of this film, and perhaps one of the most important characters and elements of the entire franchise, Clear Rivers. I fucking love this character. She's one of the only characters in the entire franchise who actually seems like a real human being and who you actually give a fuck about. But goddamn, I think this girl's a badass, and I just enjoy her presence. Played by Ali Larter.
Clear Rivers is practically an orphan. Her dad is dead, and I think her mom ran off, and she's basically living by herself in a big house. She's into making bizarre sculptures in her garage welding shop.
She fucking welds.
She's a welder.
I want to live in that garage. It is so fucking cool to see her set up and all of her weird art artifacts surrounding her.
She's semi-goth. She's into creepy stuff. She's the kind of girl who will just take you and will take you on a little date to break into the mortuary to look at the morgue. Yeah, we were talking about how we were gonna have a favorite character rundown as part of this episode, but I think we're all in agreement that Clear Rivers is not only the best character, but she's the only character in any of these 5 movies.
That's exactly what I said to Patrick the other night. I mean, okay, there is one other. I mean, I guess he's not a full-fledged character, but one other piece of connective tissue I forgot about is that Tony Todd is in all but one of these movies as William Bloodsworth.
Oh my god, I didn't realize that was his character's name.
It's either Bloodworth or Bloodsworth, but it's spelled with a U. It's totally absurd, but he's our kind of mysterious, like sort of stand-in for the Grim Reaper in these movies, and I found his performance really enjoyable.
He's our exposition dealer.
If you're not a Tony Todd fan, you will be a Tony Todd fan if you watch 5 Final Destination movies, because it feels like you're just watching a different movie when he's on the screen. He's so compelling and just so much more interesting than any of what's going on around him in these movies.
Charismatic,
Agreed.
spooky. Tony Todd of Candyman fame, I guess we should throw in for anybody who may not recognize that name right off the top, right off the tip of the tongue. I mean, he is Candyman, and he is a delightfully campy, sort of malevolent presence who is never explained what his fucking, like, who he is or what his role is in all this. But he shows up in, I think, 4 of the 5 movies to basically explain what's going on to the characters.
I have to interrupt you because you said Candyman twice, and please
we got to put a lockdown on that.
Yeah.
If we get to 5, we're fucked. Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
We're not going to do that.
Well, we know that he's like the coroner who shows up to collect the dead bodies, but what his connection is to the beyond, to death, no clue.
He's Death's hype man.
Yeah, basically.
He's the Flava Flav of the hip-hop group that is Death.
Yeah, it's funny, Chris, what you said though about the our favorite character. So, I mean, later in the process, I'm gonna weigh in on a couple characters who I did actually enjoy. There were more who I related to than I expected to. Let's put it that way. But Claire Rivers is the clear winner. And another important note about her is her name is not Claire. It's Clear.
Which I thought for the entire movie.
Which is insane. Like, who came up with that?
Well, I get the sense, like her mom ran off. Like, she's got kind of a shaky upbringing. I get the sense that her parents were like, acid freaks in the 60s and 70s. Like, she has a very boho sort of look to her and her living space. So it sort of makes sense, but it was really fucking bizarre to me to get all the way through the first movie and see that her name was Clear and not Claire.
Yeah. Insane.
Maybe she just named herself after her family fell apart.
So we have to kind of keep the train moving here because we got 4 other movies still to talk about. But I mean, we have not talked about death scenes yet. Did any in this film? I mean, death scenes are the bread and butter of this whole franchise, so we might as well discuss them. Were there any in this movie that really stood out to you guys?
Yes. So this movie has the advantage of not having really established all the tropes of the Final Destination series, so there's still a bit more suspense, and the things that happen kind of engage you a little bit more. And I thought the teacher, I forget what her name was.
Oh, it's this is great. Her name is Valerie, or Val Luton, after the famous horror producer from the 40s and 50s.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, she's played by Kristen Cloak, who became a co-lead on Millennium, and she's actually married to Glenn Morgan.
Oh.
She also had a guest role on The X-Files, but so I'm familiar with her from there. And I see her and I'm like, okay, so she's the teacher who was leading the class trip. She kind of has an interesting story, and the character's kind of interesting. She kind of put another teacher back on the plane to die, and she's conflicted about that. And I'm like, all right, so there's some sign here that she might actually be a character who's important and who survives. And though her death sequence just kind of toys with you in all these ways. She's in her house, she's making coffee, she's making tea, there's all these misdirections. You're like, oh god, how is she gonna die? Well, is she gonna die? And then she ends up dying in kind of a creative fashion, but like she gets it pretty bad. She gets like what? She gets a glass shard from her computer monitor through her neck, and then she stumbles into the kitchen, but like slips, and then
there's fire
a knife
everywhere.
Falls on her, and she ends up burning in the house. It's just the whole kitchen sink the way she ultimately dies.
It's wild, and it's like the prototype for the best death scenes in this franchise. To me, are the ones where they just set up multiple things that fucking just have you kind of grabbing the edges of your seat and going, oh my god, is she going to step on that thing? Is that thing going to explode? And you don't know how it's all going to play out. And in the end, at least to me, at least to my sick sense of humor, I'm always sort of delighted to see what it is that actually does trigger the death.
Oh my God. I like during the best sequences, and this is one of them, I'm screaming because it's also hilarious. Like innately to me, like seeing household objects just like Brave Little Toaster style take on a life of their own and conspire to kill people is one of the funniest things ever for me, it turns out.
Yes.
I'm actually, it's the one reason I'm glad I had to sit through and watch this franchise.
Yeah.
Yeah. The best deaths in this franchise are the ones that invite you to try to guess what's going to happen.
Well, and I also love how this movie starts to play with the paranoia that it inspires in the characters and in the viewer. You know, there's this sequence towards the end where they go to this cabin to like try and hide out from death, and they're like prepping the accident-proof cabin. They've got plastic spoons and gloves to protect themselves, and there's like this sudden threat of death from a rusty fish hook, and it's just delightful. You know, it plays into paranoia in a pretty like just a chill way. I don't know. There are movies that play on my paranoia, because I'm a fairly paranoid person, in ways that actually cause me anxiety. But this franchise kind of makes me laugh at my own anxiety and my own paranoia. Because it's like, wow, you're fucking ridiculous. You think this thing in the corner might potentially injure or kill you? Like, that's insane.
I want to get into this, though, because I felt the same way. I felt like it's a great... I mean, horror is generally a great outlet for fear and anxiety. There have been so many moments, as deeply fucking stupid as these movies are, there have been so many moments in my waking life after watching any one of them where I've like gotten anxious on the freeway driving into work, thinking that like a logging truck is going to come out in front of me, or like, oh, maybe I left the stove on and there's the thing next to the stove that could explode, and like I come up with these Rube Goldberg contraptions for my own death in like an instant. And then I step back and laugh at myself. It's
I was using the toaster oven last night, and as I was like turning it on, I could see the toaster oven like through the lens of like, it was like I was watching it on the screen in a Final Destination movie. But yeah, and then actually I've been doing that too in my everyday life with my cats. I'm like, all right, so how is this thing that the cat's playing with right now going to Rube Goldberg every object into my house into making something fall over and kill a cat? But no, and I think we can linger on this a little bit, because kind of the whole conceptual basis for the franchise resides in this first film. I don't think the other ones add much to the formula, or at least the thematic basis. But it's a resonant concept. It's, the thing that there's a part in this movie that really made an impression on me, where I think it's Alex talking, and he says, we all understand and usually accept that we're going to die someday, but we are also day to day extremely confident that today's not that day. Mm-hmm. Why? There's no reason. Anyone can go at any time.
Yeah.
And that's a horrifying thought. And so that's good horror plays on things that you actually should be anxious about. And so thematically, Final Destination works for me just on playing on everyone's anxiety about death and the uncertainty that it could be today. And it could be as dumb as that thing that you just inadvertently dropped on the way back into your apartment.
I'm conflicted on this. I think I wrote down in my notes after every one of these movies, like what is the moral compass of these movies? Like what are they really digging into? And then I realized, like, oh, I'm thinking too deeply about this. These movies are simply about the fear of death, and I'm not really afraid of death. So these movies didn't scare me. I guess I can understand why they would like freak someone who is more, I don't know, who is more afraid of their own mortality, or like a teenager going into these movies and they've never like thought about this stuff before, or had a loved one die. But in each movie I thought of like a deeper theme that could have been mined that would stem from the fear of death. But the reason I said I'm conflicted about this is that I think that would make these movies kind of suck.
Well, and here's the thing is, I don't think it's necessarily meant to be scary so much as just to play upon discomfort with pain. I mean, Allison with a Y has been holed up with me during quarantine, and she was like, fuck no, I'm not watching any of those movies. She loves horror, but she doesn't like the way it just lingers over the pain and discomfort that people are experiencing. And so I think the horror, what little horror I think there really is to be gleaned from these movies, comes from just that idea of dying in horrifying pain, because everybody's demise is like pretty gruesome and gross.
Yeah.
And it just plays on like, you know, wow, I might be fucking ripped to pieces by a ceiling fan or whatever it is. You know, it's not necessarily like that, oh my God, somebody's following me, or there's a demon in the corner of my room. It just kind of plays on that fear of pain, I think, more than anything.
I like the way you put that, and that makes this revelation I'm about to give you make a lot more sense to me, because I thought it was kind of bizarre at first. Clive Barker was the first person attached to direct this, and now that I'm thinking about that angle of being uncomfortable with pain and kind of like towing that line, kind of perfect.
That is fascinating. I want to see that. I want to see Clive Barker's Final Destination.
Oh, hell yeah.
I don't know, guys. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a little bit more going on in this very first film, where they're trying to kind of study death from a variety of angles, and you have some things like Clear Rivers talking about, you know, is there another universe out there where my dad didn't, you know, he skipped the cigarette stop and he's still alive, and what does my life look like in that? And you know, every now and then in the franchise you get a character who like thinks he's gonna kill himself, or he's gonna do something like he handles the inevitability of death in a different way than everybody else, and I don't know, that those moments are the most interesting moments to me. But yeah, I agree that by and large it's a dumb franchise that just wants to kill some people and get you to laugh at it.
Absolutely.
Well, there's one more element to it that I want to set up in this discussion of this first film. There's something that I found to be a common thread among every film in this franchise, which is that every Final Destination movie has a really bizarre sense of humor. There are attempts at comedy that, at least for me, not only landed flat. For example, in the opening sequence, if I'm remembering this correctly, Devon Sawa and either his brother or his friend, I can't remember who, they're kind of talking about who they're going to bang on the trip to Paris and whatever. And the other guy, who is not Devon Sawa, just says out of nowhere,
Todd,
"Hey, let's
who's
go
one
take
of the
a
most
shit."
odious characters in this entire franchise.
Yeah,
Todd, who you might remember as the monster who can't stop eating brains in the classic season 7 X-Files episode Hungry.
Wow.
This whole movie's a who's who of X-Files walk-ons.
But he just exclaims out of nowhere, "Hey, let's go take a shit." And they go and take a shit together because apparently they don't want to like go into the airplane bathroom stall and come out smelling like shit afterward. But it came out of nowhere, and it wasn't funny, but I could tell that the screenwriter was like delighted with it.
I cut it a break because I assumed that was going to tie into the circumstances of them cheating death or, you know, getting killed one way or the other, but it didn't.
No, not at all.
But, you know, the beginning of this movie, like the beginnings of, I think, most of the movies in the franchise, does a really good job of kind of putting you in that relatable space where you know, we've all been on a plane. I don't know about you guys, but every time I'm on a plane, I feel like I'm about to die. I'm not afraid to fly, but I'm just resigned to the fact that, I just might be dying today. And you get on the plane and, like, you know, the things that you look at and the things that draw your attention, and like, you see some scorching on the wing. Like, is that supposed to be there? Like, all the little details that Alex notices in this movie are details I've noticed. And so I thought it did a superb job, probably better than any other of the inciting events of any of the other movies, of kind of putting you in a relatable space and being like, this is actually a premonition, and I appreciated that. That was all good.
Well, and it's an adequately harrowing depiction of a plane crash too. I mean, the plane crash feels pretty real. Yeah,
it's probably the second best plane crash I've seen on film after The Gray.
That's a good one.
Watch that.
The plane crash sequence is like really fucking gnarly, especially because I'd seen a couple of these movies before, but I didn't really remember the tropes. When it first happens, like, I thought it was real. I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I know people have to survive this, but they're already in the air. How is that going to happen? And it's shot in like a very, what I imagine is like a naturalistic way.
Yeah. And then the reveal that it's just a premonition is genius. And it just doesn't hit the same in the next 4 movies because you know that it's going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes multiple times in the same movie.
Yes.
Yeah, seriously. So before the reviews, I think we should just throw in a quick summary of just how this wraps up so we can kind of connect the plot threads. I mean, Clear, Alex, and some other dude who I fucking forget who he even is at this point actually survive. They think they're okay. They go to Paris, and then a fucking big-ass sign swings into the one guy whose name I don't remember and kills him.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty indelible image. It's a good gotcha ending to the movie, actually.
Well, I'll tell you what that made me think of. I mean, first of all, the rules of the game change from movie to movie, but in this first movie, we're working under the assumption that if you intervene and save someone's life, then it will like skip them and they'll be saved. Whatever, it doesn't matter. So yeah, we end up with these 3 survivors, and they're actually in Paris, like a year later or something, chilling, hanging out, having a good time. And then Alex just starts to get the feeling again. And he's looking over his shoulder and he's just expecting something to go wrong. And it kind of resonated with me in that it felt kind of quaint, because in the age of pandemics and mass shootings, like I've been in cafes and like looked over my shoulder and been like, is someone just about to come in and kill us all right now? And I think that there's some anxieties just about what can go wrong in a public place now that we didn't have in 2000. And so there's something a little bit outdated, I think, about some of that paranoia.
I don't know about that. Hadn't Columbine happened by then?
Yeah, but that did not change the zeitgeist of what can go wrong to you in public the way the last decade has.
All right.
I think there was still some of that there.
Sure.
But okay, I want to talk about this ending because, it does the thing that pretty much any start to a horror franchise does. You kind of assume it's a franchise before you've even seen the movie sometimes with these teen horror films. But it's a pretty, I don't know. I mean, it's a fun ending that it just ends on that death, but it's set up for a sequel because others have survived. And it felt incomplete to me. I didn't feel there was any emotional resonance in that final little gotcha moment.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the first time I saw this, I think I literally said, "Wait, that's it?" Because there were still 3 people left, and and even once you have that sudden death of whatever his name is, there's still Clear and Alex left, and it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And honestly,
they were saving them for a sequel.
And honestly, that's a recurring theme with this franchise. Is there's a lot of endings where it's just like, what? What the fuck just happened?
Well, when we move into number 2, we can talk about my very favorite ending in the entire series.
Yes.
Oh, we're moving right now. Steven, would you view it, cue it, or screw it? Final Destination 2000.
Yeah, so I've got a whole ranking of these movies now that, I've obviously seen all 5 of them. And, in the order I would recommend them in. And I think based on that, I'm going to give Final Destination 1 a cue it. It's a fun thrill ride, especially if the concept is new to you. It's got a lot of just late 90s, early 2000s ridiculousness in it. It's got Devon Sawa's adorableness. Cue it. It's worth checking out if you're curious.
Chris.
I would give it a cue it. This is the only one of the franchise that feels like a complete thought to me, like an actual movie, and that it actually has an interesting premise and is playing with it in interesting ways and actually has some ideas under the hood. It's fine. It's not going to ruin your life. If you skip it, you probably have a pretty good sense of what the movie's like. Cue it. It's fine.
Patrick.
I'm going to set a low bar for this whole franchise. I find it entertaining in general. And if you're thinking about watching one of these movies, there's very few where I'm going to say, fuck this movie, don't watch it. I'm going to give this a view it. And just as a spoiler alert, probably going to give a few view it's out for this franchise going forward.
Okay.
Wow.
All right.
I enjoyed it.
Well, that's all right.
It's a fun franchise.
So address your hate mail to Chris and Steven.
Hey, I gave it a cue it. I think that's pretty favorable.
I gave it a cue it, too.
Cue it is pretty healthy.
Let's talk about Final Destination 2 Road Trip.
Final Destination 2 begins with maybe the most sensational and probably my favorite opening sequence in the whole franchise.
And if you've ever been in a car crash, be warned.
It is a close tie for me between 2 and 5, but this is a pretty wild and nicely put together
everything that can go wrong on the freeway does go wrong. It is a 40 car pile up, countless people dead. It is absolutely sensational. Also cut with an odd amount of comedy, like Steven was describing, where I was like, okay, I thought this movie was about to go off in like a Cabin Fever 2 direction, where it was just not giving any fucks and just being silly and mixing the excessive gore with just over the top humor. That's not actually the movie that we get for the most part.
And I will say, what you're talking about in that opening excellent crash sequence, that's kind of explained later, that is like part of Death's design as well, that kind of ironic in-your-face humor, like the kid fucking crashing the two toy cars together as they drive by him. Like that is not really meant to be, like, I thought, like, this is just ridiculous, like the number of coincidences that are occurring, but it turns out that that's part of the whole plan too. And I have to say, this is embarrassing. I just want to tack this on before we go too far down this movie fucking tricked me, because I'm new to this franchise. I, like, once again, when this car crash happened, I thought it was really happening in the movie.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
I envy that experience, honestly.
I was like, I literally said, God damn it, they fucked with me again after that ended.
Actually, yeah. You know what? I agree, because until it happens twice, it's not a trope, right? So
sure.
I was like, yeah, maybe they just survive, by the skin of their teeth. But yeah, no, they all die. It's a cast of characters. I don't even know what they were doing. They were going on a trip somewhere, and instead of getting on the freeway, she has a premonition, so she stops the car on the on-ramp, also keeping a bunch of random strangers from getting on the on-ramp. So she saves numerous lives, and then the same shit happens, and they all get picked off one by one in elaborate ways by death itself.
And I enjoy this car crash because it kind of exemplifies one of the strong suits of this franchise when it's actually working well, which is just setups and payoffs, tension and release. We spend, I don't know how many minutes, but it's a significant amount of time with this cast of characters driving down the highway, and you know something bad is going to happen. And the movie pretty successfully sets up a number of kind of little side characters as they drive along, as these our kind of group of four protagonists are looking out the windows of the car and seeing different people in other cars and vehicles on the highway. And then in the car crash, disposes of all those characters in surprising and shocking ways. And I like the tension and release. That's when this franchise is working at its best, is when it's setting up characters or potential deaths or injuries where you're going, oh, what's going to happen with that? Is anything going to happen with that? And you're just on your, a little bit on the edge of your seat, wondering how this is all going to play out.
Absolutely. Like, why is it important that this guy's like chugging a bottle of water in his car? Like, why do you have to show me that? It invites you to guess, and then it shows you, and like, that's clever. So yeah, at its best, that's what this franchise is about.
Mm-hmm. My favorite death sequence in this happens pretty early on, like, after, of course, the fake out, because it reminded me a lot of the teacher's death sequence in the first one. The kid who won the lottery.
Absolutely.
And just like fucking everything goes wrong. I was howling with laughter and glee during the sequence.
Yeah, I mean, because he's in his shitty apartment. He's got on his like diamond-studded gold watch that he's purchased with his lottery winnings. He's heating up some leftovers. He pulls some spaghetti out of the fridge that's nasty. He throws it out the window of his apartment. And everything starts to go wrong. There's metal in his microwave. The microwave's about to explode. His stove is lighting on fire. He's got his hand stuck down the garbage disposal, which I have to say is a big trigger for me. Like, that freaks me out anytime I have my hand down the garbage disposal.
We've talked about this on a previous episode. Patrick, I don't think you were on that one, but the hand in the garbage disposal, I think this is the third time that's come up in an Amon movie.
Yes.
And it's ridiculous. I think on the episode maybe that Christine was on, we talked about this, where I understand it's a completely, it works every time, because I understand it's a completely irrational fear. Garbage disposals don't just turn on their own. But every time I see that, I am just squirming in my seat the entire time.
Well, we also talked about it on our previous franchise review episode. It's in one of those Halloween movies, and also in that movie, the garbage disposal does not turn on. No one gets mauled, just as in this Final Destination movie, but it just fucks with you, because it's like, what if it turns on? What if that's going to be the thing that fucks him up? But no, his entire apartment gets lit on fire. He gets his hand out of the garbage disposal. He successfully escapes his flaming apartment and then gets down to the street and slips on the spaghetti that he threw out the window at the beginning of this whole scene. And then the fire escape ladder comes down and fucking pierces his eye/skull. And it's great. It's great. Again, build up, set up, pay off, and sometimes nothing paying off in the way that you think it's going to.
It's such a winning formula that works so well every time they stick to the formula that you'll wonder why they just don't keep sticking to the formula for all the deaths, because we only get a couple like that in each movie.
Right, some people just die in gruesome ways, but very unceremoniously, just like something flies at them, a wrench, or something comes out of a machine and blows their head off. There's not like an elaborate setup to it. But then again, if there were elaborate setups to every death, these would be longer movies, and I like that they're all a lean 90 minutes or less.
Yeah, they might have to cut some of the recurrent exposition about, every movie has like a 10-minute scene where someone's like, so I went on Google and I found out about this airplane in 2000 that was going to Paris, and there were some students and they got off the plane, and they just like have to reiterate that in every movie. And then go see Tony Todd to tell him something about, you can't cheat death. Okay.
And that drives me crazy because, I don't know, sometimes I get frustrated with franchises that have a set of rules and they don't remind you of them or make, put little twists in them or something. If your movie is called Final Destination 2, I think it's safe to assume that you've seen Final Destination 1. We don't need that shit.
Honestly, I kind of disagree, especially as we get later into the franchise and there are longer gaps between the movies. Because again, these are popcorn movies for high schoolers to go make out and, laugh at the gruesome deaths. And I think it's a pretty fair assumption, especially when you have a longer gap between movies, that nobody knows what fucking happened in the previous installments, and you might as well re-explain the concept. And it may be frustrating for those of us who are watching all 5 of them in a week and a half, but I think it sort of makes sense as far as the target audience for the movies.
But I think there's enough awareness of the basic premise of the Final Destination franchise, and frankly, the minutia that we're likely to forget about, like how you can actually change death's order or whatever, never really ends up mattering in any significant way.
Oh, it's true. Because everybody fucking dies anyway.
One of the fucking dullest elements of all these movies to me is whenever they get into that changing the order, death working in reverse, whatever. I never remember what order everyone died in the first place, and it rarely actually generates any real suspense for me to go, death is skipping to blah blah blah. I can't keep track of it, and I don't care to.
I can't keep track of it, and also every single I don't think I'm wrong here, but correct me if I am. Like every single time someone either directly, like intentionally or inadvertently, like skips a place, it's like the person that died in their stead had like some terminal health problem and they could die any moment anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. So this Final Destination 2 is only really notable to me for bringing back our friend Clear Rivers, who takes a narrative turn that we've seen before, but is usually kind of compelling, where she's actually checked herself into a mental institution because Devon Sawa's character has been killed off screen by a falling brick of all things. Very underwhelming.
Poor Devon.
So she's locked herself in a padded cell, strict restrictions on visitors to keep her safe, and the hero of this movie goes to see her and pick her brain on death, and at first Clear Rivers is like, well, I'm going to stay in the cell, but she does find the courage to come out and help everybody, and we're like, great, and then she gets unceremoniously blown up in like the last 20 minutes of the movie, and so you kind of feel like an asshole for ever caring about Clear Rivers in the first place.
And I love that scene where our heroine, Kimberly, I think is her name, is going to visit Clear. It's a great, sort of like Silence of the Lambs-esque walk down the mental hospital corridor, and the doctor is, running Kimberly through all the things she can't bring into Clear's room, no belt buckles, let me check your nails to make sure they're not long or sharp, because Clear has a list of precautions she's taken to make sure absolutely nothing can happen to her in this institution, which of course still begs the question, why doesn't Death come up with some way to just light the fucking mental institution on fire or something? But still, it's fun.
Why people drop dead all the time? I mean, Death could just give her an aneurysm, right?
Yeah, sure. And yes, I also agree that Clear's ultimate demise is extremely unceremonious in the end.
And that's really kind of one of my main complaints with the whole franchise, which is that, most of the characters are completely disposable, but every now and then you try to meet the movie halfway and you start to kind of care a little bit about the character, and then the movie's just like, ha, you cared about those characters? Fuck you, they all just died.
You know what my favorite character in this movie was? It was the little kid and his mom. So it's the kid that was, I think he was playing with water bottles, like playing the drums, while his mom's driving him to the dentist, and the water bottle gets stuck under the brakes. So they finally decide to go to the dentist, and this kid's a little whippersnapper. He's got a pretty sick sense of humor, it turns out. And this ties back into very awkward moments of humor in the series for me, where as he's going in for his dentist appointment, I don't know if it's a routine cleaning or what, he turns to his mom and says, almost without affect, "Hey, if he gives me the gas and I wake up with my pants unbuttoned, we ain't paying."
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah.
And the mom doesn't even know how to react to it.
Yeah, she sort of chuckles like, oh, you.
Yeah.
But it's like a 9-year-old boy. Like, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
That death scene is, again, one of my favorites in the movie, because there are a lot of great misdirects. You see the ultimate cause of that character's death right at the beginning of the sequence and don't even realize that that's how it's going to play out. But I mean, again, this is one that just really plays with one of my main fears, which is being anesthetized and unable to move, but still able to feel things. And he's got the nitrous on in the dentist chair, but he can't actually move, and fucking shit's falling into his mouth. You think he's going to die in the dentist chair, but no, he just walks out onto the street and gets fucking smashed, just disintegrated by a falling plate of window glass, which is
because
such an
he can't stop
absurd
playing
death.
with those pigeons.
What's that?
It's funny. It's so arbitrary how he just makes a break and just runs across the street to chase pigeons. But it's fine. It's funny. I liked it. It may be a little disappointing that the death didn't actually have to do with the dentist's office.
I was not disappointed
that's part
in
of
the
the
least.
thrill
I
ride
could
of
not
it.
have been more entertained by that whole sequence.
That's part of the thrill ride, and okay, this is probably going to be an ongoing conversation too. Like, do the clues fucking matter from whoever the clairvoyant is who first, witnesses the vision of the big, death scene at the beginning? Like, the pigeons were a clue that came to Kimberly. And so, like, when she shows up, somehow they figured out that this kid was going to the dentist that day, and they knew where the dentist office was, which is also a construction site. As she sees the kid, she yells, "Pigeons." So he, instinctively runs to them. I thought it was so funny.
Let me tell you another trope of this series that is fucking tiresome to me, is the fucking clairvoyant clues. It's not in the first movie at all, I don't think. And in the second movie, you have some clues. The third movie, which we're going to get to, goes deep on the clues, and it's really tiresome to me. I just don't give a fuck.
Following the clues and trying to come up with how to cheat's death plan. It's just kind of like obligatory stuff to fill the sequences between the kill moments that everyone's paying to see.
Yeah.
So it's like in this movie, you have all this really contrived stuff about saving a pregnant woman so she can deliver a baby, because only the new life can save you from the holy shit.
Oh god, that was exhausting.
Then our hero has to drown herself and her heart stops so she can be saved, brought back to life, and I don't know. It's all dreck.
What the fuck is this ending? This really takes the what just happened quotient to the next level in my book.
I love it. So there's a big crash sequence on a farm where a bunch of people die, and one character saves the life of the little farmhand boy who's out there working. So basically, that boy is implicated in Death's sadistic design now. Everybody that survives gets together for a good old-fashioned barbecue for some reason to reminisce about the good old times when a bunch of people got murked on their farm.
Including one character who we have never seen before, the mother of this boy who's been saved.
Yeah. And so they're all having a great time. We got lots of gauzy lighting. Everybody's drinking wine. It seems like we're going to have a happy ending. The kid goes off to light the barbecue and just fucking explodes. End of movie.
And then his arm lands on his mom's plate. She screams. End movie.
Love it.
Yeah,
absolutely love it. It to me, like there was some draggy moments in this entry, and I'm like always unclear about what the sense of humor behind these movies is. Like, I like that ending just kind of took the air out of everything.
I felt like I needed an explanation of what had just happened. I went on Wikipedia. I went back and rewatched the scenes of this boy getting saved in the first place. I was like, what just happened? Have I seen this mom character before? What's going on? It was like I needed to, when you watch one of these fucking overly convoluted TV shows and you want to read the recap afterwards to understand what you've just watched. I was like, what just happened, man? And this had been the second time that I'd watched this movie, and I was still like, what?
I mean, I don't know. It was perfectly clear to me, but either way, were you entertained? How did you feel that was the ending to this portion of the saga?
I feel annoyed. I think it just frustrated me because the basic twist was supposed to play with this whole concept of Death's plan being reordered or whatever, which is, again, one of the more tiresome parts of this franchise to me. And I was just, I don't know, didn't turn the dial for me.
Well,
but
Patrick,
on that note,
would you
review
it or
this
screw
shit?
it?
Yes, let's review it. You know what? I'm going to give this one another view it. There's enough entertainment value in this one for me, even despite my problems with it, that I'm like, yeah, fuck. I mean, the fucking kitchen scene alone, the spaghetti slip alone is great entertainment, worth the price of admission for me. So yeah, go for it. Chris.
Screw it. The deaths were good. The sense of humor when it was hitting was good, but there's so much just really boring connective tissue. Probably the weakest connective tissue in the franchise, except for the fourth movie, which didn't have any connective tissue. This is my second least favorite movie in the franchise.
Wow.
You could do better. Screw it.
Interesting. So early on, you criticized the franchise for not having connective tissue, but you're criticizing this installment for having too much connective tissue.
Shitty connective tissue, like characters I just really don't care about, and like taking me down some rant, like nothing thematic, nothing about the characters, nothing, just random people word vomiting about new life and pregnant ladies and stuff. Sorry, can't do it.
All right, Steven.
I'll give it a Q. I mean, there's some really fun stuff in here. It gets bogged down quite a bit in the second act. I don't really give that much of a shit about Clear coming back because I think like we have to set our standards pretty low for character development in these films. It felt very soap opera-y to me in a fun way, but then I wondered why they even set that up if they were just going to kill her so quickly and unceremoniously toward the end of the movie. But yeah, the opening sequence is great. That I've had to drive into work a couple of times during quarantine, and the only thing on the road right now are 18-wheelers. So it's like kind of a nightmare to be surrounded by these things, and they're driving super fucking fast because the police aren't issuing speed tickets anymore. And I've thought about this movie every time I've had to drive in, so it had an impact on me. Ultimately. It's pretty silly, and there are some boring stretches in it. So, yeah, I think a Q it sounds about right.
All right, on to Final Destination 3.
Yeah, Final Destination 3. Yeah, the roller coaster one, and I'll be more positive about this one. This one, really? I thought worked for the most part.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, this is definitely. I mean, it doesn't have kind of the high concept basis that Final Destination 1 I think sort of aspired to, but this is one of the best distillations of the franchise for me. The deaths are good. I thought the connective tissue in this one was actually more compelling than the others. I kind of cared more about the characters in this one than the others. I thought it was better shot and better made than the others. A good time for me.
It's the return of James Wong, which I think maybe says something to the fact that it has more of a look to it, and it feels a little bit more coherent than Part 2.
Yeah, and we didn't hit on this at all, but like Final Destination 2 looks like, and this was kind of just odd to me, like it's shot like a Lifetime movie. Like there's absolutely no mood to it, and so I was really conscious of that. And I was like, it's interesting because like the Saw movies, which I love, of course, have gone through a series of hands, a series of staff, but like you have all these really grisly subject matter, but it's always like looks like dark and grimy and gross throughout the entire franchise. It has a distinct mood to it, and it was weird that like there would be such a tonal shift from the first Final Destination to Final Destination 2, where it just looks like the most generic, like made for TV movie, but also people are just dying in horrific ways and full of blood. Interesting.
In this movie, it is big and bright and colorful, and like the camera just like moves so eloquently through it. It's as ridiculous as any of the other films, but it's like a world I wanted to live in for a little while.
It's easy to make gorgeous cinematography, like if you're at an amusement park and you just have all those little lights everywhere and all the bokeh and everything like that. So
you have to know how to shoot it. I mean, I thought a lot about, as you guys know, I'm obsessed right now with the movie The Funhouse, and I'm trying to write a remake of it. But like this captured that vibe where it felt like this carnival was created specifically for this movie. It wasn't like they just dropped in on a random traveling carnival, because what traveling carnival has a full-fledged roller coaster in it, first of all? And it felt like it was all very purposeful. I don't think it was just that they were like exploiting an existing location. But the question I had immediately watching this movie was this originally released in 3D? Because everything feels so purposefully shot, so there's stuff coming at you. Things are like in like sharper focus than they would be normally. And it turns out they were intending to shoot this in 3D, but they abandoned it. And yet somehow the cinematography still conveys that kind of sense of a 3D movie, where you have a different sense of like sort of space in the images than you would in an ordinary slasher movie like this.
Well, that's interesting to me, but also just like you guys' general impressions of this film are interesting to me, because I could not disagree more. I mean, I don't notice an appreciable difference in the visuals or the cinematography between 1 and 2. And 3, I was interested that you said, it's sort of bright and colorful, because when I think of it, I think of really dark imagery. And also, to me, it's a lot harder to read visually, especially if you just compare like that opening car crash scene in 2, which, as we talked about, is, I think, really, really well done and reads quite well, to the roller coaster opening scene in this third one, which was interesting to me, and I think kind of played on my fears about being on a roller coaster and things going wrong. But a lot of the time, I had a hard time understanding what the fuck was actually going on in that scene. It didn't read very well to me.
Yeah, the roller coaster sequence is not the strongest opening incident of these movies.
I love it. I love it. It's not the highway crash of the second movie, but I feel like it stands on its own terms. Like, I felt like it was all like, it like looked, I mean, the CGI is shitty, but it looks really good for when it came out. And I felt like all of the little things that have to click in place for everything to go wrong were very like cleverly communicated.
I agree with that. I also agree with Patrick that it's kind of hard to track the action, and it's just again, it's relatable, but it's not as relatable as being on a plane or being in a car thing. But what I did like about the beginning of this movie is it kind of takes its time to get to the roller coaster, and it does some character work, and you kind of understand all the characters, and you get to meet them, and they will become important later. And our hero, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, playing a girl named Wendy, kind of has her own motivation. She's trying to take pictures for the school yearbook and stuff, and also she's has a hard time with roller coasters and everything in general. And I thought that was all very interesting. And putting people on a ride, I love roller coasters, but like when that harness comes down and you realize that especially when you start rolling down the track and get out of the view of the operator, and you're like, oh, there's nothing I can do right now to get off this ride. Mm-hmm. That's great.
That's a legit fear of mine. I mean, I don't go on roller coasters anymore. I just generally tend to get...
Why not?
I tend to get sick. I get motion sickness pretty easily. But that said, like this did kind of tap into that fear of mine of like, okay, well, for one, I assume, again, maybe I'm wrong, that this is a traveling carnival, and I'm reading a book about carnivals right now in preparation for the script I'm writing, and I'm like thinking about like just kind of the people that we trust to put these incredibly complicated and dangerous things together might not be the most trustworthy people always. Like there's a lot of nuts and bolts that have to be tightened down. Like I don't think I would ever feel safe on a roller coaster again.
I mean, all right. Well, look, there's different types of carnivals, different types of amusement park rides. I have a lot of confidence in, say, Cedar Point, or a permanent thing
sure.
that has actual engineers working full time and stuff. You go to the Monroe County Fair on like Sunday afternoon when they're setting up the rides, and you see the random people who travel with the carnival, and they're putting up the Ferris wheel, and you see them literally like kicking shit in place with their foot.
Yeah.
I've seen that before, and you're like, oh yeah, that's gonna kill somebody.
Horrifying. I will give big props to Mary Elizabeth Winstead, one of the few actual actors in this franchise who does create a character who you care about. Otherwise, man, these characters were fairly stock for me and failed to register for the most part, other than fucking Frankie Cheeks. Again, just one of the most odious creeps in this entire franchise. I mean, he's supposed to be, but my God, he's so over the top and just absolutely disgusting.
Oh, well, but he's got a necklace.
This movie does that a lot. This movie often gives you characters who are just odious and offensive and sexist or racist, and it begins to you start to say, okay, you know what? It's not okay to have racist jokes just because they're coming from a racist character.
Oh boy, we are going to get into that in the next movie.
Yes, we will.
We'll get into that.
What struck me about just the first, the setup before the roller coaster happens is I don't know, it really felt like the writers and director had wanted to make a statement. They didn't feel like the previous two films in the franchise were authentic enough to how horny teenagers really are. I mean, in the beginning of this movie, there's an upskirt shot in the first 5 minutes of this thing. There's
you don't actually see up the skirt, but someone takes.
We don't see it, but someone does it, and there's a lot of chatter about it, and nobody seems really all that disgusted by it. There's we have our main character, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, our protagonist. She's got a deadline for the school yearbook.
Automatically, right off the bat, she has more motivation than any other character in this franchise.
It's true. There's nothing like a deadline. But she's surrounded by horny guys who are convincing her to take pictures of scantily clad girls from their class playing a very erotic balloon pop game. There's just a lot of absurd horniness in the early part of this movie that really sort of baffled me. It felt like it was going for broke in a strange way. I don't have anything more to say about that. Didn't bother me. I just thought it stood out like a sore thumb in the screenplay for the first 10 or 15 minutes.
Speaking of things that stand out like a sore thumb, did you guys think that Wendy's character was supposed to be a control freak? Because they only reference that 9,000 times. The character literally says, I'm a control freak, so many times. It's hilarious.
Right, but there isn't really an arc out of that, is there? Because you would assume when your character starts the movie talking about how much of a control freak she is, and she's a control freak for the whole movie, and she's trying to cheat death, you would assume that the script would have her give up control willingly in order to save her friends or something. That doesn't happen, does it?
No, and it's it's a great germ of an idea for this franchise as well, because, you know, you're dealing with the ultimate control freak, apparently Death, who has very meticulous designs for how everyone's going to perish. And I thought it would be fun if she did get like extremely meticulous about her sort of her plan and her research on this. But I mean, when she tries to do that, she just falls asleep at the keyboard.
Yeah. There are a couple of good deaths in this. I mean, the tanning bed scene is gratuitous for the TNA
Hilarious
factor, but man, it's pretty well put together as far as just ridiculous chains of events coming together to gruesomely dispatch characters.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like the drive-through sequence in which our heroes are being menaced by, like, you know, runaway trucks while they're trapped in the drive-through, and they escape, and you think they're safe only for the engine block to go through their car into the back of the guy in front of them's head, and that turns out to be their classmate, and they didn't have any idea.
Frankie Cheeks, good riddance.
Yeah, lots of fun stuff. The hardware sequence, the hardware store sequence in this movie is one of the highlights of the franchise for me.
That's a nice slow build.
Yeah, and also, you know, those characters were interesting too. You know, you got kind of the like edgy, the too edgy, like I don't even know how you would describe that, like that guy's clique or anything. Like he's like the guy who wants to explain the laws of physics to you, like you're an idiot, but he's also like a hipster who's too cool for school, but he's also kind of punk. I don't know.
Yeah, he also like shops at Hot Topic exclusively.
Right, you know, so he's kind of like he and our heroes are kind of having a lot of back and forth about, you know, kind of the philosophy and how to push back against death, and so that's interesting. That keeps you busy while you start to see all these things happen in the hardware store that are interesting, and then it ends with one of the best deaths in the franchise for me.
Yeah, that's nicely done because it starts and ends. It's similar to that dentist office sequence where right at the beginning of the sequence, you see the thing that's going to cause the death, which is in this case a nail gun. And then the sequence goes on at quite some length to introduce a lot of other things that you think are going to kill people. And then in the end, it's just somebody getting fucking absolutely nailed. Well, literally nailed through the back of the head with a nail gun. And it's like, okay.
Excruciating. Oh, also, I almost forgot that this was this movie because they all run together. I really liked the weight room scene.
That's a good scene, too. Yeah. Especially because...
And it's the same thing, too, where, like...
Go Bruins.
Wendy is going into, you know, it's a hilarious caricature of like a football weight room. So that was entertaining.
But
for
that
itself.
for some reason has sharpened swords hanging on the wall of it.
Right. And so like they're like playing private out because they have these like pictures that they think like reveal the cause of death for all their friends. And so they go see this guy and like, you know, they're paranoid and they're like looking around the room and they're like trying to figure out, much like we are, the characters are trying to figure out what in this room is going to kill their friend. And then, you know, things play out in a surprising way. All good
It does a
stuff.
good job of bringing you into Wendy's paranoid point of view.
Not a lot of missteps in this movie for me.
There's some weird pseudo-political stuff in it. I mean, there are references to 9/11 and Osama bin Laden and Lincoln for some reason as well.
Dude, there is a shot in this movie of a photo of like a shadow of a jet plane cast over the Twin Towers that is accompanied by a sound effect of like a jet plane flying over, and it's so ridiculous and gratuitous and over the top. And I mean, again, I apply all those words, ridiculous and gratuitous and over the top, to a movie in which two like busty young women roast to death in tanning beds, naked. You know, it's absurd. I was underwhelmed by the Founders Festival sequence at the end. I don't know. There's a lot of buildup with fireworks and shit. It just, there are more exciting ways for these characters to die than they end up dying.
Yeah, at the end, that final sequence, it seemed like it kind of tied up a whole bunch of stuff really quickly and not that greatly. Also, I thought that, you know, the punk kid that we were talking about coming back as an antagonist, he starts following Wendy. He, like, decides that he's going to kill her, and that's going to be the way he fucks up Death's plan. And I thought that was an interesting concept, but, could have got more out of that, I thought.
They didn't follow through, but hey, we still have number 4 to talk about here soon, so... Or wait, is it 5? Doesn't matter. They're going to follow up on that kind of... it's going to become a trope.
Yeah,
but
it
I agree
becomes
with you.
a trope,
In this movie, it was very underwhelming. I agree. I thought it was going to go to darker places.
Let me tell you another reason why I like the movie. Because at the end, we have our heroes surviving. Wendy survives, and so does her sister, who actually they did a decent job by Final Destination standards of making me care about Wendy's sister.
I disagree completely. I was like, who is this? Why do I care?
Same.
Oh, okay. Whatever. Oh, the little moment with the bracelet went a long way for me. Again, I'm holding it to a different standard than I would, something else. So it's like, the falling action where they're all on a subway train and there's a horrible accident, but turns out it's a premonition again that Wendy is having, and that they are all doomed to die on the subway train, and she tries to get them to stop the train, and it doesn't seem like it works. But we don't really know what happens. And that was, I liked that. I liked how, they're probably going to die, but there's still some room for hope that these characters that you actually give a shit about didn't just unceremoniously die at the end of the movie.
Oh, there seemed to be no room for hope to me. It seemed premonition again for no apparent reason other than to just throw a new kink into the proceedings. And again, for no apparent reason, because then they apparently are all going to die anyways. At least that's how I read it.
That's how I did too, but so this has me questioning something that I thought about gradually more and more often while watching this franchise is where do the premonitions come from? Are they is it
Dude, it's Jesus. Definitely
is it
Jesus.
Government satellites.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous that death has this extremely clear plan and yet would somehow allow that little tiny lapse over and over and over again. Maybe it's just his way of toying with us. I don't know.
Maybe.
But I wish there were answers. Maybe when we finally get the next Final Destination sequel in a couple of years, we'll finally know.
Good. They can delve more into the rules.
It's also worth noting that I think this franchise has been around long enough at this point and is well established enough that we kind of overlook the really sort of clever conceit that there is no physical antagonist to this film. And I can't think of any other horror movie where there's not... I mean, It Follows kind of, I guess, fits into this category.
Yes.
But
that's the only other one I could think of. But I was watching, this is the first movie I saw in the franchise on a date with someone about a year or two ago. And one of my first questions was, because I was like, oh, you're going to make me watch a fucking Final Destination movie. So I was being a jerk about it and asking a lot of detailed questions about the rules and the mythology. And I was like, so who's behind all this? Do we ever see death?
No.
And we don't. And that's kind of brilliant in a way.
It's wild. It's great. I mean, good for them. Especially over the course of 5 movies, you reach for things to try and spice up a franchise after that many movies. And it's actually kind of astonishing that death still has not been really seen or personified other than sort of Tony Todd's character who always shows up and says spooky shit. I mean, he is not death, but he's about the closest thing we get to some sort of physical.
He's the voice of the devil in
films.
this one, though.
Oh,
that
is
was
he?
great.
The devil in the roller coaster,
and the voice of the PA on the train at the end.
Oh,
was that him? I wasn't sure about that. It didn't sound quite like him, but I'll believe it.
The whole no antagonist thing's fine, but it when they do try to lean into making death an antagonist, it doesn't really work for me. As if death's a personified thing, and he wants this, he's coming back, and then they're cussing out death as they're duct taping their shovels to the walls.
Oh, I don't want that.
Whatever.
I don't want that at all. I'd rather death be kind of a mystery presence.
Yeah. All right.
Or when you see the shadow of a bony hand in your bedroom, which actually happens. All right, so let's review the damn thing. I'll go first. I will give Final Destination 3 a cue it. Unfortunately, none of these rise to the level of view it for me, although Final Destination 3 may be my favorite one.
Wow.
I think you could make a good argument for the first or the third one to be the best of the franchise, depending on your mood and what you want in a horror movie.
Fascinating. I gotta go cue it on this as well. There are things I like in it. Again, I enjoy Mary Elizabeth Winstead's performance. There are a couple good death scenes in it for me. But the opening sequence, as I said already, is kind of hard for me to follow. I really don't like the ending of this movie, and I don't like the we didn't talk about it much, but this kind of recurring bit of Wendy referring to the photos that she took at the amusement park to find clues of how people are going to die. Again, that whole business is just very dull to me. So it mostly succeeds on the basis of her performance and a few good death scenes. Steven?
I'm going to give it a view it. I love this movie. Love this movie. I mean, it is trash, but it's, in my opinion, very well executed trash. It's beautiful. It's colorful. You know, I'm very much into sort of the carnival aspect of the first third of the movie or so. That's just a milieu I love to live in. I also love kind of like small town centennial festivals with fireworks and that sort of thing. So that's kind of a perfect bookend. This movie was just a blast for me. It never seemed to take itself as seriously as a lot of the other entries, had more of a sense of humor about the material. It was consistently thrilling, beautifully shot. There's a split diopter shot in this movie, which always gets me hard.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I noticed that.
Great.
I was like, what? I was like, who the hell rented a split diopter for Final Destination 3?
Right. Yeah, no, it's just, you know, it's not a great movie, but you know, putting this on the same, you know, in the same category as the other movies we review on the show, I would recommend this over like 80% of the shit we've watched so far. So view it.
Wow.
Yeah, agree.
Wild. This entire experience so far has been wild. Just these reactions. So I'm fascinated to see what we're all going to have to say about Final Destination 4, the NASCAR one.
Well, I don't think it's going to surprise anybody. Final Destination 4, I think, is universally recognized as the low point of the series. I had actually heard good things about the opening race car sequence, which I think people were fucking with me.
I texted Chris after I finished this movie, and I just asked, like, so was that really a movie? Or some variation of that? Final Destination 4 has, like, no style, no substance. The special effects budget is clearly the lowest in the entire series, and yet it relies on special effects maybe more than some of the others. It's a mess.
So this was the one that was released in 3D.
Yes.
And so that kind of explains,
not just the one.
I think.
4 and 5 were both released in 3D.
Okay, so yeah, but the Final Destination 4, aka the Final Destination, it really leans into like putting CGI blood and guts flying at the screen at the expense of basically everything else.
It looks like, I wrote this in my notes twice. I mean, not that it gives it any more credence than me saying it out loud, but this looks worse than a Sci-Fi Channel TV movie in places for me. Like, it's just, it was hard to just look at sometimes in those stretches between anybody dying.
Yeah.
So basic premise is they're at a not quite NASCAR, but a major racing event. All hell breaks loose. Things go into the stands basically and kill everybody. But our premonition friend Nick O'Bannon is able to save his friends and some random race spectators. And then they all die. And just I don't know. I mean, I guess there were a couple good sequences. Actually, one of my favorite sequences in the franchise happen to be in Final Destination 4, but that doesn't spare Final Destination 4 any favor with me.
Yeah, my problem with this one is that it kind of reduces the whole concept to just the most basic elements, I guess. There's a bunch of death scenes. Most of them don't have that sort of tension and release that, again, I've talked about multiple times, but that's what the best sequences of this franchise succeed on. So many of these deaths just feel very sudden and just kind of going for that, as I always say, look at that, a guy just suddenly gets dragged down the street by his own tow truck. There's just a lot of very sudden stuff that doesn't have that same build up where you're just sort of relishing / dreading whatever is about to happen.
Yeah. The only death that follows the winning formula in this movie is the woman at the hair salon.
Yeah. That's
was
nicely
fine.
done. There's a lot of good misdirects in that.
Great stuff.
Even
that wasn't my favorite.
Even that's like even that for me is like I giggled out loud, but I was like, man, that was still like a pretty low tier death sequence for the series, and that's probably the best one. What you were gonna say? What's your favorite though, Chris?
My favorite, no one actually dies in. My favorite sequence in this, and one of my favorite in the franchises, is the car wash.
Oh
scene.
my fucking god! Oh my god!
What a delight! What a delight!
I thought it was like a Yo Mama joke. Like, Yo Mama's so dumb she could drown in a car wash? like, where does that... Is that like a fear that people have? That they could get trapped in a car wash and get submerged?
Dude, I was terrified of car washes when I was a little kid for some reason, and I'm not scared of them anymore, but there is something weird and scary about your car being on this track and you have no control. There are big, like, spinny things all around you, and... You know, I don't know. This sort of introduced a fear to me now. I just recently bought a car that does have a sunroof, and I'm like, fuck, that is not a mechanically controlled thing. Like, what if my sunroof just gets stuck open? What happened?
Then you open the door and you walk out.
No, but
there's too much machinery there.
You can't open the door in this scene because there's fucking huge spinny things that would fucking... Oh, yeah, that one really got me.
Car washes scared me as a kid. Like, I did the wild woolly shit that's coming at you, and you feel like you're on a different planet because you can't see anything else. You're in the dark, and there's soap everywhere. Like, it was always kind of creepy and fun to me, but I never thought about drowning in my car, potentially, from being in a car wash.
No, but that's what's so fun about it. Like, you know, in real life, if your sunroof gets stuck open in the car wash, like, it's annoying because, like, you're gonna have water all over your shit. But no, not only does the sunroof get stuck, but like a water main just opens up right above the sunroof and literally just fills the car with water. And so she's got, try to get out the sunroof, but she can't. Instead, her head just gets stuck and almost gets put through the big roller at the end of the line. It was just sensational. I loved it.
That's one of those indelible images for me, is her head like stuck in the sunroof and about to get fucking decapitated by the roller. And then at the last minute, she gets saved, which honestly... The bloodlust in me was just sort of disappointed. I was like, all right, you got me this far in this sort of distressing scene. I just want to see her head get lopped off by this big rolling brush.
I wanted her to die too. I would not say, I don't know. I find it interesting that you guys both seem to find the scene very distressing. I was laughing my ass off the entire time, just at the sheer absurdity of it, that like this made it from idea to script through multiple drafts and then into the movie, and it's not even a death sequence in a Final Destination movie. I don't know. I thought it was hilarious.
Don't get me wrong. I was also smiling and laughing.
Okay, great.
But, I mean, again, I think it gets at one of the strong suits of this franchise, which is that it plays on some fears that you have, but also encourages you to kind of laugh at those fears and realize how ridiculous they are.
Sure, and these movies are real. I mean, if there's anything that I commend them for, even though by and large I would pan these movies, it's that. It's taking, like, even the most ridiculous fears that you might not even have about sort of how you could die in everyday circumstances, planting them in your brain, and then allowing you to laugh at the absurdity of being worried about that.
Yeah.
It's very fun.
Another death scene in this film that I did enjoy but kind of wanted to go further was the scene where the fucking asshole jock bro gets caught in the pool. Like, he accidentally triggers the pool starting to drain and then gets his ass caught in the drain of the pool. And it reminded me of a Chuck Palahniuk short story, I think. I forget the name of the story, but I think in the Palahniuk story, someone is sexually aroused by putting their private parts against the
you can say
drain
anus
or whatever of the pool, and then accidentally gets their intestines sucked out. And I don't know, somehow I wanted this scene to go further than just seeing some like intestines spout up out of the pool, whatever you call the thing that sucks things out. I wanted this to be more gruesome. I wanted to see his rectum just get sucked the fuck out, especially because this guy was such an asshole earlier in the movie.
An asshole. I was with you though. Like, I was disappointed by just like the cartoonish splash of blood that we get. I was expecting to see entrails or something. Then again, do I really want to see more than that? I've read that Chuck Palahniuk story, and it is one of the most cringe-inducing, squirmy things I've ever read, and I was kind of relieved that the movie just left it at blood.
Mm-hmm.
So this movie ends with just a complete shit show of a big series of set pieces in a movie theater, in a mall. None of it worked for me. I don't think it was very compelling for a lot of people. I don't even know if I want to talk about it.
I actually enjoyed some of this. I enjoyed, what's his name? Who knows the protagonist's name? This installment has some of the most disposable characters of any in the franchise, but I enjoyed him getting and again, this is another one where he gets a second premonition of what's going to happen. The movie theater is going to blow up, and then he has to go back and try and prevent that happening. And I actually did enjoy some of the behind the scenes of him, a nail gun returns and nails him to the wall, and he's trying to prevent this explosion in the theater at the last minute. And that stuff was fairly tense for me, and I enjoyed it.
The stuff in the theater, I felt like this movie was... Well, first of all, I love that there are just barrels of chemicals labeled spontaneously combustible behind like seemingly every screening room in this theater. I thought that was hilarious. But it felt like this was supposed to be a meta moment, especially because this movie did come out in 3D, where it was like trying to make some kind of comment about violence as entertainment. And that really bugged me because it didn't really seem to have the ambition to go anywhere with that. They just wanted to like pretend they were clever and introduce that topic and then just let it go.
I don't think they were trying to aspire to any theme. I think that they were just like, oh, people are going to watch this in a movie theater in 3D. So if we had an end sequence that was in a movie theater in 3D and it feels like maybe the screen is your screen. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's what I got from it, but I was like, I'm as shitty as this movie was, I might have appreciated them just like trying to knock it out of the park with that metaphor and just do something new with the material. But no dice.
It's Drek, and this is also the one I took 4 notes on this movie, and one of the notes is that the opening credits and the Easter eggs in this movie are kind of the first time in the franchise that I felt rewarded for having seen the other movies, because the guy goes by a billboard or something that says, "Oh, Clear River's drinking water," and I'm like, ha ha.
Oh, I didn't even
remember
notice
that character. Yeah.
Oh my
anyway,
God,
things like that.
So gratuitous.
But my other 3 notes were just like cataloging all the unnecessary racism in this movie.
Yes, we have to talk about that. Holy shit.
Again, you have a character who is just an avowed racist who actually, is about to light a cross on a black man's front yard.
I did not expect to hear the N-word in the Final Destination franchise.
Did not either.
It's not necessary.
What is this,
It's
green
not
room?
what we come here for.
Yeah. Let alone a cross being lit on a black man's
Let
front
alone
lawn.
the black man later attempting to hang himself and then just sitting around chilling, having a conversation with a noose around his neck.
Is this Watchmen?
Oh, I was like screaming for multiple reasons when he just left the noose around his neck during that conversation.
Insane.
I don't know what the fuck they were thinking.
And he's just trying to kill himself because he thinks he's going to play into Death's plan, and then literally moments later he's deciding that's not what he's doing, and they're doing a champagne toast. It's wild.
Yeah, and then of course you have the throwaway old guy who's getting the hydrotherapy, who just goes full Gran Torino on his Asian nurse for no reason.
Oh God, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, the racism, especially the racism with the redneck against the black guy, is so cringy because it just felt like a grab for some sort of social political consciousness that just didn't land at all.
I don't even think there was thought put into it. I don't know. Really? It was dumb. I don't excuse it. It was.
Oh, I don't excuse it at all. I just.
Oh yeah, I know you're not. I don't know.
That was bizarre. I was just like, what did he just say? Why are we going here right now?
It was a lot. Yeah.
It's a rare movie that can get away with having characters say those things and do those things and have it justified, and the Final Destinations franchise is not up to the task.
No. So I also want to touch briefly on the escalator scene, because this is another one that sort of plays into this weird irrational fear I have. Many times I've been on an escalator and it's like, oh my God, what if some part of my clothing got caught and I got sucked into the escalator? But this movie's take on that is so ludicrous to me, because the girl who gets eaten by the escalator... This is one of the funniest moments in the entire franchise to me. Her leg first gets caught, and you see a shot of her leg. It's getting like crunched up in the escalator's inner workings. And then we cut to a shot of her face, and she spits blood. No part of her body at this point has been crushed that should cause her to be spitting like a mouthful of blood. And it just, for some reason, I don't know, it's sort of nitpicky almost, but it took me out of it so much and just really swung the dial to that, just laughing at the absurdity of it instead of being grounded in any sort of reality of the horror of that scenario.
The issue with that scene is that being afraid of being caught in the escalator is a very relatable thing, right? So the first part of the sequence where like she's going up the escalator and her shoe's untied, and then she's like, "Oh, my shoe's untied."
That's great.
And, it's no big deal. That's great.
High suspense.
That's relatable. When I'm afraid of an escalator, I'm afraid of like getting my shoelace stuck in the escalator or something, my leg torn off or something. I'm not afraid of like falling into the gaping maw of like 6 foot wide elevator gears that are made of CGI.
I'm not worried about what's beneath the stairs. In fact, I've never thought about it before until this movie.
Right. Yeah, and there's so much like gratuitous. This movie is really going all out for the 3D, trying to just throw as many things into the extreme foreground to make you go as possible. And it looks like shit. All the premonitions in it are terrible CG where shit like shoots into your face. It's, oh boy, it's not good.
It's a big oof.
No. It's a big oof.
I would give the Final Destination unequivocal screw it. How about you guys?
Same, and I have nothing more to add that I haven't already said.
Yeah, I think I can get on that train as well. It's, there are a couple of moments that are fun, but definitely the low point of the whole series for me. Screw it.
So yeah, I would give the car wash sequence a view it. Go look that one up on YouTube and then pretend the rest of the movie doesn't exist.
I will say this is the last note that I had that I thought was like mildly amusing. So like Patrick, I kind of have an alternate moniker for each one of these movies, or like a subtitle, and I wrote down FD4, the 2009 made-for-TV movie. That's my alternate subtitle for this. I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, it's accurate.
So before we get on to Final Destination 5, I'm wondering, have any of you ever had a Final Destination-esque brush with death?
Oh, dude, I mean, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, do tell, please.
I mean, you were there for it, Chris. I mean, I almost fucking drowned in Panama.
Oh yeah, he almost died.
We were snorkeling off this beautiful island. We went on a snorkeling trip, and we got pretty far out, and Chris and our friend Jeff challenged us to a race back to the shore. And I'm not a great swimmer. I was a worse swimmer then, and I'm still not a great swimmer. And about, well, not even halfway, but partway back to the shore, I think I got some water in my mouth or snorkel or something, and just kind of started panicking. And I literally, I mean, no exaggeration, confronted the, not even possibility, but it was an expectation in my mind that I was going to die. And I distinctly remember like looking around at the surroundings and being like, this is beautiful. Like, this is a great place to die.
Oh no.
And fortunately, Jeff and Chris, after what felt like an eternity of me struggling, realized that I was struggling, and they helped me back to shore. And I think I coughed up about a gallon of salt water. But yeah, it wasn't even close to a brush with death. I literally thought I was going to die.
It took me a little bit longer to realize that he was in peril than it took Jeff.
Chris was back there doing this. He was just like making like generic race noises while he swam. And so I'm like just struggling there thinking I'm going to die. And I hear Chris behind me going,
yeah.
Did you have a premonition before this happened? Is the real question.
No, sadly.
Patrick, we have a shared like almost death story as well, a little brush with death from our trip to Traverse City that I just remembered.
Wait, what was this? I don't even remember.
The kayak, the rogue kayak.
Oh yes. Oh, dude, that's Final
blew us off
Destination
the
as
fucking
fuck.
road.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a car in front of us as we were driving up to Traverse City that had 3 kayaks loaded onto one of those roof racks that, as far as I know, is generally only designed to hold 2 kayaks, but the middle one came loose and just flew off into the road. And Stephen was driving and did a fantastic job of just calmly maneuvering around this thing.
I don't know that I thought I was going to die, but I mean, I've been in a number of like pretty serious car accidents before, and I just thought like, man, this trip's over. Like that thing's going to get lodged under the wheels. We're going to, you know, maybe get kinks in our necks or something, wind up in the ditch. And we avoided it, but it felt like an eternity of like me just like staring this fucking inanimate object down, trying to predict its next move and alter my speed and steering to avoid it. And I think we did at the very last minute. It just kind of coasted off into the ditch and we moved on.
Yeah, dude, it did feel like you were just going toe to toe with death in that moment and just saying, fuck no, bitch. There was a weird, like almost telekinetic nature to the way that kayak sort of meandered into the middle of the road and then slowly slunk off into the ditch as though it was like, all right, I'm not going to one.
And this was at very high speed. I mean, we were on like a country highway doing like 75 probably.
Yeah.
and you know, that thing was going just as fast, if not faster, because it like had the wind gust propelling it as it flew off the top of the car in front of us.
Yeah.
Scary shit. Do you have one, Chris?
Amazing. I'm probably forgetting something obvious, but I have a similar kind of brush with drowning that happened in the middle school pool where we were like doing canoeing class and the canoe tipped over, and like every time I tried to get back to the surface, like a kid who was treading water would just kick me back down, and like I had a premonition of, I had a vision of me like getting recovered from the water, and I was like, oh, that's the next thing I'm gonna see. But I don't know, that was probably the one time I was like, I thought I was in real danger. In retrospect, there was something when I was a kid. I was at camp with my class, and we were on this boardwalk over this really boggy like marsh, and we were trying to find swamp life, and there wasn't much at the surface, but some kids found out that they took big sticks and put it down into the muck off the boardwalk and pulled them out, that there would be little like worms and shit on the stick in the mud. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do that. So I got a big stick and I went off and pushed it off of the boardwalk, and it was like really thick muck, and it was really hard to drive the stick down there. So I put like all my weight off the edge of the boardwalk onto this stick, and then the stick broke. And the next thing I saw was I was facing the boardwalk, like next to the stick. So I must have gone head over heels, like complete. I don't know how I ended up. So I was looking back at the boardwalk, but like I could have just as easily landed with my head down in the muck or gotten impaled on the broken stick. And this muck was hard to get out of. Like I had to have assistance getting out of it. And like I lost a boot. So
wow.
I could have got Final Destination for sure.
Wow.
As a child.
I want to add to that one last thing. I actually was just recounting this story with a friend last night, and I'm not going to tell the whole story, but I encountered quicksand once in my life and almost saw a friend get completely submerged in it.
Oh my God.
That was fucking terrible. This was in Monroe. In a cornfield.
Where's the quicksand patch in Monroe?
It's very small. It's like about the size
Are
that
there
a human
piranhas
could
in
fall
Monroe
into.
too?
Who the fuck knows? But that was terrifying. I felt like that might have been his Final Destination moment. Don't know if he's still alive or not, but we did manage to pull him out. It took 3 or 4 of us.
Wow.
Thank God.
Well, now that we've all recounted our Final Destination moments, I guess it's time to reach the final destination in our Final Destination journey, Final Destination 5.
Yes,
the bridge one.
We note that I don't think we even mentioned this while talking about the previous movie. The previous movie was called The Final Destination, which indicates some kind of finality to the franchise.
Yeah.
And yet here we are again, bigger and bolder than ever with Chris. I'm assuming you know this, but Stephen Quayle, a longtime second unit director for James Cameron, was brought in to direct this thing.
Second unit director on Titanic.
I feel like you can tell. I mean, this has got big second unit director energy to it.
Yeah, and then the production values are higher than probably the rest of the series.
Agreed.
I would have to see, because I did notice that this was also released in 3D, right? Yes, but the maturity of the 3D in this movie, I mean, having only seen it in 2D, seems a little far superior to the last movie. So I'm wondering if this was a second unit director that learned some things from James Cameron about 3D and how it's actually supposed to be used and how it's not just for throwing CG entrails at your face.
I'm sure. Because he worked on Aliens of the Deep and like all of his like IMAX movies. Like I think he knows what's going on.
Much as I hate to admit it and throw James Cameron a bone, I absolutely agree. The opening sequence is pretty gripping and uses 3D and, as Chris said, pretty mature ways in the sense that it's not always trying to throw things directly at your face. It's trying to show you depth beyond.
It's used in a way that grounds you in the set piece in a very God, I'm losing my words as well. I did feel like I could sense that I was in this space on this bridge in the opening sort of death dream sequence in this movie with these characters. There's a lot going on with the 3D that even emphasizes like little background details to give you a sense of depth.
Well, yeah, there are. So, I mean, we should send up a little bit. A group of coworkers are on a big tour bus. They're going on a company retreat. They're driving across a bridge, and the bridge starts to crumble. And sort of the shot that's stuck in my mind is at one point, there's just a big chunk of the bridge has fallen out, and the camera kind of pivots forward and shows you just a look down at the water through this hole in the bridge, looking at the water below. And it's fairly chilling, and it really stuck out to me because it actually made me think, wow, I wish I could see this in 3D, which I can't say I've ever thought about any other movie ever because I fucking hate 3D. It's annoying. It's gimmicky. And this, I was actually like, wow, that's a chilling shot. And I bet it would be even more striking if I had that added illusion of depth.
Well, these are gimmicky movies, so like it does feel to me like in a way to be kind of the perfect candidate for a movie that like if I had a 3D TV, I'd want to get this on Blu-ray, only for that opening sequence. I don't know about the rest of the movie.
Yeah, the rest of the movie I don't think would really benefit much from 3D. The opening sequence for sure. I'm looking at Wikipedia right now. Director Stephen Quayle was a second unit director on Avatar and says he borrowed the technology from Avatar for Final Destination 5.
Interesting. Well, if we're talking about
don't say James Cameron never did anything for you.
Well, what technology? Because... like, is it like it's not the mocap technology, but like, what did James Cameron develop for that?
The link's dead, but there was a new camera system for 3D, I think, that they developed for Avatar. I don't know the details off the top of my head.
Well, if we're talking about the creative team on this movie, we should also note that it is from the writer of the remakes of Nightmare on Elm Street, The Thing, and the Amon classic, Bird Box.
Oh, so this is a Platinum Dunes production then.
It's quite a resume.
That's
incredible.
Something. Wow.
Well, this is certainly probably the most polished entry in the Final Destination series.
Weirdly,
I can understand people making an argument that this is the best one. I didn't think so personally, but you could do a lot worse in this franchise.
You could do a lot worse. I mean, one thing you can't polish out of these movies, though, is the racism that pops up in these last two chapters.
Oh, God.
Right.
We'll get into it later, but there's some rough edges around this. Otherwise, like, pretty slick package.
And also, being a more modern Final Destination movie, I was struck by the digital color grading, especially in the early scene. I don't know if anyone gives a fuck about digital color grading other than me. Okay, I don't know if this is something our listeners want to hear when they tune into the
I was going to say,
podcast.
I don't know if anyone gives a fuck about digital color grading other than you two.
Yeah.
I mean, we jump off from there. We've got this great set piece on the bridge, and then what ensues is a series of like, I don't think I really related to any other set piece in this movie. Not that even related to the inciting incident at all. I mean, this movie has some spa foo. It's got some gymnasium foo. It's got some LASIK foo.
I mean, I didn't relate.
The place.
I didn't relate in the sense of like having necessarily feared these things, but I think this has some of the best death scenes in the franchise. This gymnastics sequence is absolutely horrifying. It has great use of that tension and release that I keep talking about. There's a fucking screw that lands on a balance beam, pointing end up, and you're just waiting for a gymnast to finally step on it for what feels like forever. The resolution to that sequence is horrifying and so gruesome and over the top. And the way this girl's back just gets broken and her legs wrapped around her head backwards.
I absolutely love that sequence. It might be my favorite in the franchise. I can't say enough good things about that. It's just the perfect example, again, of you're being drawn in to try to put the puzzle together before death does and try to guess what's going to happen to this gymnast. And the ultimate fate of the gymnast is so much less complex than you were expecting in a hilarious way.
That's top 5 for me. There's, a good several minutes of setup where you're wondering how she's going to die, and that's kind of classic Final Destination. That's the prototypical Final Destination entertainment that I'm looking for.
It's true. Okay, that's true, but like the way that she actually dies is that, I mean, one, there's like a lot of distractions going on, but like she makes a false move herself that ends up with her winding up dead. I don't think we'd seen that before in the franchise.
I would disagree with that. She gets distracted because a bunch of chalk or kind of dust flies in her face.
A bunch of chalk dust flies in her face and throws her off.
And
sure, no, I get that it throws her off, but like it's interesting that she sort of like, I don't know, in some ways, like her death doesn't feel like quite as linked to death's machinations as a lot of the other deaths in these movies.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was surprising. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was a really fun sequence, as ridiculous as it is. And that the scene where she hits the floor is absolutely horrifying.
Another image that's just going to be burned into my brain. I was also really struck by the LASIK sequence because I wear glasses. I've occasionally thought about getting LASIK. There are some fucking horror stories out there already about LASIK. And, I think the horror stories I'd already read were enough to turn me off that possibility. But this LASIK scene probably is the clincher where I'm just like, yeah, I'm good.
Oh, me too. This is the one takeaway from this franchise, like the one sort of everyday fear that this movie kind of like emboldened within me was the LASIK scene. Again, as ridiculous as it is, it was like, yeah, I've been kind of toying with it. I've never been serious about it. No, just not going to do it because like any number of things could go wrong and I could end up having like a fucking laser blast through my head.
I don't know. I have anxieties about getting LASIK, but the depiction in this movie was so far removed from what my anxieties are that it just was comical to me and didn't really make me feel anything. I don't know how they do LASIK, but I just imagine being in the chair and it's like you're feeling something very uncomfortable in your eye, and if you move your eye or you blink, it just like cuts into your eye.
So okay, this is all right. So it's not quite Final Destination level in the sense that I thought I was going to die, but I actually have an experience sort of with this exactly. I had this.
What?
They call it a recurrent corneal abrasion, where something on your eyeball gets scratched and a scar forms repeatedly on your eye. And each morning when you open your eye, the scar gets ripped off. It's very painful. I had a lot of eye pain for months because of this. And I had 2 different operations where the solution to this problem is they basically go into your eye with a diamond-tipped blade, basically. And the idea...
The only thing hard enough to cut your eye.
Yeah. No, it's actually diamond. Diamond is involved in the tool that they use. And they basically scrape your eye up more. The idea is that they create more of a wound so that it will heal a new kind of scar and heal permanently. I had 2 different operations where I was just sitting there totally awake and watching this thing go into my eye and scrape up my eye. So I relate to this scene on a deep level, is what I'm saying.
Mm. Patrick, you have we've talked about 2 stories involving near death, involving you and either me or Chris. You've had so many strange health problems. I think quarantine might be the way to go for our friendship from here on out. I'm getting a little spooked.
Maybe it's just Zoom. I
feel like
for
just
us
like hanging out with you is
buddy.
just flirting with death and discomfort.
Oh man. So let's also talk about the acupuncture scene. Because, as Steven said, it's the return of this just kind of gratuitous racism. There's this douchebag character in the grand tradition of Todd and Frankie Cheeks, who is just a ladies' man. He's constantly being a dick to all these women he slept with and forgetting like their names and all this shit. He goes to a spa that's run by Asian folks and is just constantly making absurd racist comments to them, and ends up dying by having a bunch of acupuncture needles shoved into him when he falls off the acupuncture table. Well, actually, no, that's not what causes his eventual death. His eventual death is caused by a giant Buddha statue falling on his head and crushing his head, which I have to say I laughed at. I enjoyed that capper to the scene.
Well, because his character is so shitty. I mean, he's terrible to women, including one of our, sort of main characters from the beginning. He also, we should note, Google Craig Finn, and that's basically who we've got here playing this character.
Well, I read him as a satire or a spoof of the Verizon guy.
Yes, absolutely. Because there's even the joke about the cell phone.
He's always on his phone. Yeah.
And also, oh my God, I don't know if I should say this yet, but I'm going to. I was like really alarmed. So this came out in 2011. I was like, that's an old looking cell phone. And he's the only character in this movie that has a cell phone. This is strange to me somehow. It's going to pay off. It's going to pay off when we talk about the end. But yeah, it felt
and
like...
boy, does it.
I thought maybe it was the Verizon guy for a minute, but it's something that, again, like this series, like, attempts at humor are so strange to me, because it's clear that we're supposed to think this guy is a douchebag, but he's just so cartoonish. I mean, he's so racist that he even like insults the Buddha statue by saying lay off the rice cakes, which of course the payoff to that is the fat Buddha statue crushes his head. I was happy to see him die, but I was not happy with like how much bullshit I had to deal with from this motherfucker, and he was the first to die in the death dream, I think. So
frankly, I wasn't sure if the whole setup kind of felt racist to me too.
Yes.
We're doing caricatures of Chinese medicine and acupuncture, and it's a little sacrilegious to have a Buddha killing the guy. I don't know. It was just all obnoxious to me. The character was obnoxious. The setup was obnoxious. Depictions were obnoxious.
It felt like, to me, this whole sequence, it felt like an episode of the Tales from the Crypt TV series condensed. Like, that is the kind of humor they would go with. It's the kind of character and the kind of, like, campy... Yeah, just sort of the campy humor that would be employed in one of those series. You're dealing with a guy who is a douchebag from the beginning. He's also a racist. He's horribly sexist. He treats women terribly. Somehow, even though he's very unattractive in pretty much every way, not just physically, but his personality... It could have worked as a lesser Tales from the Crypt episode. I was really frustrated with how much time we had to spend with this motherfucker in this movie. Like, I feel like not just with him, but the death sequences in this movie drag on way longer than they do in other entries, where they're like trying to build in superficial character stuff during the lead up to their death. And I can appreciate that motive. It just really doesn't work with the characters that we're here to deal with.
So I guess I disagree somewhat with what you seem to be saying about the characters. I actually thought this movie doesn't win any awards for me as far as like having my favorite characters of the franchise in it. That's still clear, and probably also Wendy from Final Destination 3. But I thought this had the most well-rounded set of characters in it, where I actually knew who each of them were and cared about more characters than in any other installment.
Yeah, I knew what we were working with. It just felt a little bit tedious to me because then at the end of the day, I can't say I really cared for any of them. I mean, I think like maybe the most sympathetic character is the boyfriend partner of the gymnast. Like he seems like a pretty solid guy from the beginning. Well, no, obviously he turns evil. But like from the beginning,
he's a douchebag to her in the very first scene. He's like fucking sleeping with his intern. That guy is a dick.
Yeah, he's not like great. He's not a great guy by any means, but like he feels like the most human of all of these characters in an odd way. He experiences a very deep and perplexing sense of grief after his girlfriend dies during her routine, and it really like gnaws at him in a way that I initially found to be like one of the most relatable human reactions to a death in this entire series. Of course, eventually that is taken way the fuck over the top, but I really appreciated that the movie actually took the time to like take this guy who, he's kind of a cad. He's not a cad without a soul, but it gave that character some time to breathe and like actually react and grieve in a realistic way, for this franchise to one of the absurd deaths. And I don't know that I've really seen that elsewhere in this franchise. That was all too short-lived, though, because, we'll get into it, but eventually he becomes kind of a comic book supervillain. He becomes seriously James Franco in Spider-Man.
All I could see was Tom Cruise, and I just wanted to watch Mission Impossible 3 instead of this movie.
That's a good movie.
I was just surprised by the degree to which I actually cared what happened to a number of these characters as the movie went on. And Wild, and again, is kind of an amusing indicator of, just grading against the curve for this franchise. It's like, wow, there were 4 whole characters that I cared about. But it's an accomplishment.
Yeah, but where does that care get you in the end?
I followed it through. It brought me through the movie. I guess it did get me somewhere.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, the end. The end. Twist ending.
Dude, love this ending. Came out of nowhere for me. They started to board the plane. The twist is this movie is a prequel to the entire series. When Steven referenced Craig Finn's outdated-looking phone, it's because the movie takes place before Final Destination 1, and it ends with our 2 protagonists getting on the plane that crashes in the original Final Destination 1, which I found fairly clever and I guess sort of high concept in like a Christopher Nolan sort of way, especially in the context of this franchise. I was just like, all right, I appreciate that you went there.
It was a good twist. As a fan of the Saw franchise, I can appreciate very Saw. This kind of twist. Saw did this more than once. But again, I just feel insulted a little bit when it's like, oh, I actually kind of cared about these characters, and you're just trying to show me what an idiot I was for doing so. What I would do if I were to rewrite the movie is have it be exactly what you see. You see the plane crash. On the plane crash, you still get the clever twist, but it turns out to be another premonition that our hero was having at the same time as Devon Sawa in the original movie.
No.
And maybe they decide not to board the plane, but maybe they're still cursed.
No.
Again, that's me saying have your dark ending, but we don't need to see our hero's face getting burned off at the end.
Yeah, that doesn't really turn the dial for me.
So convoluted.
If it had just ended with our heroes getting killed on the plane, I wouldn't have been thrilled about it. But I kind of like the sick final joke that the one character who we think has escaped death turns out that he actually had, I forget what it is, a heart condition or something where he was going to die soon anyways, so death already had it in for him. And then a big piece of the fucking engine from the plane drops on him in the bar, and that's the end of the movie. I was in.
That'd be great if we knew. Okay, if it like. I'm okay with this ending, even because all these movies end with a stupid fucking fake out of some kind. I like that read, Patrick. I like that ending better because like as soon as I saw the plane, and we know from the beginning, though I didn't catch on to it, in relation to the first movie, that one of our protagonists has a job offer to work at a restaurant in Paris, and that he finally decides to go. If we saw the plane, we saw him and his girlfriend get on, and then we saw the sequence that we see with the general manager of the factory and the engine coming down, like that's enough for me. That's actually a pretty clever way to frame what is otherwise a terribly ridiculous ending.
Yeah, this honestly is probably my favorite ending of the franchise because too many of the other ones are just big WTFs for me. And this one actually feels clever and like it has some degree of a master plan and isn't just trying to do some weird last minute rug pull. I mean, it's still a rug pull, but at least I understand what the fuck has actually happened.
Maybe it's baked in there somewhere and I didn't notice, but I kind of wish, like we've talked a lot about clues in these movies. I kind of wish there'd been more clues along the way that this wasn't taking place in present day and that it was somehow linked to that initial incident. That could have been kind of fun. But we haven't talked about the real ending of this movie, which is the fucking clip show that we get as soon as this ends.
Dude, honestly, amazing.
Oh my God, I almost had to walk away. So we end with Final Destination 5 on the screen, but then it starts counting back 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we get like a clip show that's like framed within a frame. The greatest hits. Sure. The greatest hits of Final Destination.
It's
totally
great.
unnecessary.
I loved it.
Well, it's a lean movie. It had to give you some more bang for your buck in the end.
The only complaint I can make about this movie is that the deaths do kind of like tail off as it goes along. There's the gymnastics scene, there's the acupuncture, there's the LASIK, which we've all talked about. And then like David Koechner just like takes a wrench to the face. There's this kitchen fight scene, which I like the way they set up all the many things that could kill people in the kitchen. That's, again, some nice tension setup, but it's fairly pedestrian the way that all plays out in the end.
I was hoping for a little bit more Rube Goldberg death kind of stuff going on concurrently with Tom Cruise trying to kill our heroes.
Well, they set up the gun that Tom Cruise is using. It gets dropped onto a stovetop, and it's gradually getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And
I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen.
Right, and I kind of wish it would have just taken the kind of track of the other movies in the series and just it finally goes off and it kills one of the two who escape.
Or hell, maybe it kills all three of them if they're all going to die in the next scene anyway. That would have been more satisfying for me.
If the bullet just goes through all three of their heads.
Fuck that.
Or not just the bullet, but a series of things that involves everything in the kitchen and all three of them die.
Oh yeah, knives and shish kebab skewers and all the other shit that they're playing with. That would have been great.
Can't have everything.
Have everything. Do we want to review it?
Yeah,
yes.
Might as well. I'll give it a Q. This is a lot of fun. Especially if we're, looking at this in the scope of the entire franchise, this is, in many ways, even just down to production design, directing, I think the actors are pretty good for the most part. The attempts at humor that I've mostly found to be kind of bizarre and uncomfortable actually sometimes pay off in this movie. It's kind of a great encapsulation of kind of all the rules of the franchise, while also introducing a new aspect, which is a character actually deciding that he would rather murder someone else to escape death's path. I don't know if I was fully satisfied with how that played out, but I liked that idea was finally introduced into the franchise. So lots of surprises for those who think they've seen it all with the Final Destination franchise. Give it a Q it. Patrick?
Yeah, it's a view it for me. I had a lot of fun with this one. Some good deaths, characters I actually cared about for once, highest production value of the franchise. And yeah, as you mentioned, Stephen, it kind of tweaks the formula in some ways that are actually interesting. It dispenses with the whole tracking down clues, that whole bullshit. Brings Tony Todd back, who we failed to mention is absent for Final Destination 4, but he's back. Cooler than fucking ever. very enjoyable. Loved the ending. Even loved the clip show. I mean, surprisingly good capper to this whole experience, because by the time you get to number 5, it's like, oh, this is going to be garbage, but nicely done.
Chris, what did you think of it?
I'll give it a Q. It wasn't great. Like I said, I think I understand why people like it. It's certainly very polished. It gives you a little bit of everything. It has some of the best death sequences in the movie, in the franchise. I don't know, and it kind of petered out towards the end. But I think whether you have watched the franchise or if it's your first time going into the, if you have to just watch one Final Destination movie, you could do worse. I'll give it a Q.
Well, guys, we've done it. We've talked about all 5 Final Destination movies, reviewed them all.
It's over.
It's almost over. I want to ask, lastly, if you guys would care to rank the franchise just in order. Which is your favorite? And also, I'm wondering, what's your favorite death of the franchise?
I'm not into the death thing. I feel like there have been enough articles online about that over the years, but I will rank these movies. 3 is my favorite. I think 5 is a close second, and then we're gonna go 2, 1, 4. Yeah, 3, 5, 2, 1, 4. That sounds about right.
I'm gonna go 3, 1, 5, 2, 4.
I'm fascinated that 3 is so high on both y'all's lists.
And deaths, I already mentioned my favorites. I like the gymnast scene, I like the car wash scene, and I like the teacher in the first movie.
Yeah. Oh, the teacher's got to be my favorite. Yeah.
So you do have a favorite death, Steven.
I do have a favorite death. I just didn't know if I wanted to spend too much time talking about that, because it seems sort of obvious when we're talking about this franchise. But Patrick, rank it. Give us your favorite death.
We're going to be snappy with it. My favorites: 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and favorite death. I think I got to go 3-way tie between the spaghetti slip, the dentist office, and the scene.
Fantastic. Well, that's another franchise in the books for the old Amon cast.
Man, good job, you guys. We got to have another quarantine sometime soon so we can review some other franchise even horrifyingly longer than the 2 we've already done.
Dabe. Let's do all the Dabe movies.
Yes. Dude, I think it's worth noting. Yeah, we've so longtime listeners may remember we reviewed Dabe the Possession. Is that the subtitle of Dabe? I already forgot. Yeah, and there's an iconic, I think we could describe it as, scene in which an exorcist breaks a toilet curse or places a toilet curse. I forget. He excavates a toilet and brings a ton of just intestines and guts out of it. It's an amazing scene. We posted it on our Facebook. And recently, a ton of South Asian folks have been discovering this video and liking, commenting on it, sharing it, and liking our page as well. So welcome those folks to the Amon family, and we're glad that we brought you in with this bizarre-ass sequence.
Yeah, and thank God for Google Translate. Because it's really cool to have people from all over the world come in and talk about this show. But I mean, the reality is sometimes they're starting their own threads, and they're posting this to their pages. And otherwise, I would have no idea what they're actually talking about. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's delightful. Yep. So what are we watching next? I have lost all track of whose turn it is to pick a film next, because we've kind of gone off our usual plan for a bit here.
Well, I think it's my turn.
It's
unless
Chris's
someone wants
turn.
to fight me for it.
No one wants to fight you for it. What are we watching next, Chris?
Well, as much as I would love to watch every Tremors movie on Netflix, because there's 6 of them. No. And as much as I would love to force you guys to watch Resident Evil Apocalypse, which is also on Netflix, and you should all watch on your own time, I think we're going to watch a movie called Death House.
Okay.
Have you heard of Death House?
No, tell us about it.
It's not too late to change your pick to Resident Evil Apocalypse, though.
So here's the synopsis that's on Netflix. It says, 2 federal agents battle through an army of rioting prisoners and their sense of reality inside a high-tech prison modeled after Dante's Inferno.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
And would you like to know the cast of Death House?
Hit us with it.
This is the Avengers of B-movie horror. We've got Kane Hodder, our friend Dee Wallace, Michael Berryman, Tony Todd, Adrian Barbeau,
Oh my
Barbara
God.
Crampton,
What?
Sid Haig, Bill Moseley, Felissa Rose,
What?
Lloyd Kaufman, and a whole bunch
shit.
of other people who I don't know who they are off the top of my head.
Wow. All right.
That's
I mean,
wild.
All right. So next episode, we're going to watch Death House. Is that the title, Chris? Am I getting that right?
Death House.
Death
Yep.
House. And in the meantime, you need to go to every horror movie on Netflix.com. Click the merch store link. Go buy our t-shirt. It looks sick. You're going to love it. Your friends are going to love it. And we're going to love it because we'll make a little bit of money off of it. And there'll be a little bit more Amon love out there in the world to get people to watch this.
If you like Death's design, you'll love Patrick's design for our t-shirt.
It's a great t-shirt. Buy it. Review us, please. Guys, I think you can all agree that it's been fucking fantastic to actually have people coming out of the woodwork and giving us some feedback. It's nice to know people are listening, and it's good to hear from y'all. And supposedly it helps our ratings somehow.
We also need you to go and subscribe to the podcast, review it on your podcast platform of choice, and follow us on your social media platforms at Amoncast, EHMONcast. Is that all our business?
Cool.
Do we need to
That's it.
tell people to do anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching the Final Destination series. If you watched along with us, as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts, and tune in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about Death House.
Can't wait.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this journey to Death's Design for every horror movie on Netflix. I'm Patrick,
I'm Chris.
I'm Steven.
and we will see you next time.
Watch your step out there.
You know what was really fucking sad is last night I got this calendar... no, I'm sorry, actually it was Thursday night. I got a calendar reminder that Motor City Nightmares was supposed to be this weekend, and I got sad all over again.
Oh, yeah, we're never seeing that money.